Okay, hello everyone. Before we begin, I would like maybe to ask all of you to mute your speakers unless you talk, because we may hear an echo if you don't do it. Also on my screen, the speaker that we see is usually the person who does not have their mic mute, because it catches on little sounds from the audience. So I think it would be helpful if we all muted ourselves unless we are actually asking questions or giving presentations. Okay, so let me start. My name is Anna Muller, and I'm a professor of history, of modern Polish history at the University of Michigan, Dearborn. And I'm very excited about today's event. And I'm also deeply grateful and honored that I was given this opportunity to welcome you all from Vilnius, Lithuania, our guests and the audience, on behalf of the Polish American Historical Association, to this webinar titled Polish American Stories and Storytelling, that hosts three wonderful guests whom I will introduce very shortly. And thank you all for being here with us on this Saturday afternoon. So let me first say a few things about the order of today's meeting, and then I will follow with the introduction of our guests. We'll begin with a few remarks by Mary Erdmans, followed by presentations of Leslie Pietrzyk and Kristina Kwacz. After Leslie and Kristina's presentation, Mary will start us off with a few questions, and then we'll open the floor for the questions from the audience. And you will also have a chat open. The chat is open the entire time to ask your questions. We'll try to monitor those and ask them as they come in. Okay, let me just change the view for the recording. I'm trying to keep a speaker, but somehow it does not necessarily work on my, hopefully it will be okay on the recording. So let me start with Mary Erdmans, who is a professor of sociology at Case Western Reserve University. She received her PhD in sociology from Northwestern University. Her literary essays have been published in the North American Review, the Los Angeles Review, Slow Trains, and the Best Travel Writing. Her scholarly books, Opposite Poles, The Gresiński Girls, On Becoming a Teen Mom, have received numerous awards, and her articles have appeared in various academic journals, including Polish American Studies, Sociological Quarterly, Humanity and Society, Journal of American Ethnic History, Studia Migracyjne, and Pamięć i Sprawiedliwość. She was a Fulbright Scholar in Poland in 2019, where she interviewed political refugees who returned to Poland after the collapse of communism. Mary has used live story interviews in several of her studies, including the Gresiński Girls, based on the stories of her mother and aunts, fourth-generation Polish Americans in Michigan. On Becoming a Teen Mom, based on the stories of teen moms in Connecticut, and her current work on the return of Solidarity refugees. Next, after Mary, we'll hear from Kristina Kwacz, who is an independent scholar whose areas of interest include Polish and Eastern European studies, the Polish diaspora in the United States, and memory work with family photos, and which is an ongoing project incorporating these themes that explore her identity as the daughter of Polish immigrants that were profoundly impacted by war and totalitarianism. In her vocation of documentary photography, Poland and Eastern Europe have captured Kristina's eyes since 1988. She has exhibited many of her black and white photographs in group and solo exhibitions, often presenting associated lectures. Professionally, Kristina is Director of Albany Operations for the Deputy Leader of the New York State Senate. Last but not least, Leslie Pietrzyk, and the author of 5 books, including the novel Pears on a Willow Tree, about 4 generations of Polish American women. Her collection of linked stories set in DC, Admit This to No One, was published in 2021 by Unnamed Press. Her first collection of stories, This Angel on My Chest, won the 2015 Drew Hines Literature Prize. Her short fiction and essays have appeared in, among others, Plowshares, Story Magazine, Hudson Review, Southern Review, Gettysburg Review, Iowa Review, The Sun, Cincinnati Review, and the Washington Post magazine. Her awards include a Pushcart Prize in 2020, and the 2020 Creative Arts Prize from the Polish American Historical Association. She teaches fiction and creative nonfiction in Converse University's Slow Residency MFA program in Spartansburg, South Carolina, and lives in Winston-Salem, North Carolina. Thank you all for being here with us, and I will give the floor to Mary.
Thank you, Anna. First of all, I also like to thank Marta Cieślak, for the president of Polish American Historical Association, who invited me and helped to organize this, and just the Polish American Historical Association in general for being a great organization. I hope everyone who's here will join and become members. Maybe we can put a member link in the chat. And second, thank you for the audience for attending. I like that we're able to have these global Zooms that started in the pandemic, and it's one of the few good things that came out of that. As Anya said, I am a sociologist, and two of the methods of sociology lend themselves to storytelling. One is ethnography, where I sort of always say sociologists act like anthropologists, and we are studying a particular culture, and we write field notes, and then we look for patterns, and we look for a story to tell. A subset of that is autoethnography, and I think that this is what Kristina is doing. It's new, it's exciting, and in a sense you are training the gaze on yourself. This is who you are looking at, but it's still a systematic process of analyzing, writing notes, and looking for patterns. The second methodology is life story interviewing, which is a broader type of interviewing. And it's rather than interviewing where you ask questions and you look for answers, you sit down with the tape recorder with someone and you look for stories. So you don't have questions as much as themes or topics. And for example, in my latest work of looking at these political refugees who returned to Poland, and they grew up in the communist Poland in the 50s and the 60s. They were young children. I simply have to mention the word radio. And so many stories tumble out of their mouth about the role of radio in their house during communist time, right? And so you have sort of more prompts rather than questions. And I think of life story interviewing, which is again sort of maybe sociologists acting like historians, which they call it oral histories. It's that you're not directing them; they're directing you. And rather than doing sort of top down analyzing where you come in with all the questions, a lot of life story interviewing allows people, or oral histories allow people to define themselves and to find topics. Some of the issues that we deal with as social scientists in this are memory, and it's an issue we could have a whole session on memory. Language, how do you use language? Whose words? The authenticity of language. Honesty or truthiness, which is different from misremembering, but how do people want to shape what they're telling you? And again, thinking of interviewing, and Alessandra Portelli talks about the interview as an interview. There are two people are viewing each other. So if someone's telling you their story, you have to be aware of how you as the listener, or I think of myself as a listener as someone who catches the story, how you as a listener are shaping what the person is telling you, right? So there's this interviewing going on. And then realizing that it will never be complete in what people tell you. I have one of my narrators in my study now, I've interviewed him so far for 35 hours. And it's just every time I go, he's telling me something new, right? So people hold back things, people don't remember things, but it is, you don't try to get it complete. We're similar to fictional storytellers, though at many times I often wish I was a fictional storyteller to get around some of these issues, in that we're always also looking for plot or a narrative arc. We don't just want description. And the iconic example of this is, the king died and the queen died. Plot is the king died and the queen died of grief. So you want point A and point B to be connected to each other to sort of tell a story, right? And we're also, I think that this fictional storytellers also deal with voice in terms of dialogue and authenticity, right? So how does the voice, and I'll just have to say, and Leslie Pietrzyk, Pears in a Willow Tree, I absolutely, it's one of my favorite works. But when I'm hearing her characters talk, I'm hearing my aunts talk. So there's sort of an authenticity that's there. How we're different is that in fiction, you don't usually have a thesis statement. In scientific writing or social science writing, we don't get to use suspense and surprise. I like this idea of sort of, how you plant seeds or breadcrumbs in a story so that the reader is following you. And again, we have to sort of lead our readers by the nose in social science, right? I'm going to now. Yes, okay. I actually have control over muting people. I love that power. Okay, so I am right now, I'm going to turn it over to Kristina. And as Anya said, first we'll listen to Kristina speak, and then we'll listen to Leslie, and then we'll open it up for discussion. If you have questions, though, as Kristina speaks, feel free to put them in chat so you don't forget them, or write them down, and then we'll come back to them later, okay? All right, so Kristina.
Okay, good morning. Thank you, Mary. Great introduction to our program today. Before I start my presentation, I really want to do a shout out to Anya Muller, who is jet lagged, but this event was birthed during a wonderful breakfast, a post-conference breakfast in Connecticut, looped in PAHA President Marta Cieślak, who is all go. And really an honor to have Mary and Leslie join us this morning for this. We are focusing on Polish American stories, but it's family stories, and everyone has a family and everyone has a story. And hopefully you will take something away from today's program that will be useful and meaningful. Also, thank you to everyone who's making the time, whether this is this morning or this afternoon, and especially all my people. I know I've got some cousins here and some friends and colleagues. Really, thank you for making the time. So now I will try to share my screen, which is always my favorite part during a Zoom presentation. So fingers crossed that I can make this work. Okay. All right, let's see, back to here. Share screen. Okay. Beginning. Meet you guys.
Okay.
Okay. Do we see my screen? Are we good?
We're good.
Okay, cool. Okay.
Yeah, looks fine.
Okay, wonderful. All right. We are all born into stories that began long before we arrived, and we become self within their borders. It's the opening quote of my presentation, and just kind of keep that in mind. I'm going to talk about how this is true for me, but really I think it's true for all of us. My parents' story is a dramatic one, weaving war, totalitarian regimes, and the union and ultimate reunion following 2 decades apart of veritable strangers. Arriving in the wake of the 20, I grew up in the shadow of a story recounted time and time again by my mother. She told of her arranged marriage in January 1939, and how just a few weeks later she left Poland to begin a new life in America. The outbreak of the Second World War halted the immigration of her husband, and 20 years would pass before the couple reunited. 2 years later, I was born to this pair, an only child appearing late in their lives. In adulthood, I puzzled over questions surrounding this tale. Why did my mother wait so long for her partner, essentially a stranger, to join her? What traumas did each bring to the marriage from their 2 decades apart? And why did it take 20 full years for her husband to emigrate from Poland post-war? A master's program in midlife provided the structure to begin to address these questions, with both parents no longer living, researching the economic, political, social, and cultural factors that likely influence their choices yields clues. Studying the history of Poland during World War II, Stalinism, Polish Catholicism, and the Polish diaspora in the United States provides context in which to ground their experiences. But how to filter this information in a way that's relevant to me? A wise mentor suggested I look at how scholars interpret family photographs. Boom. For me, that was it. Sifting through scores of family photos, I identified images from 3 periods: the 20, the years of estrangement, the era of our family, and the years following my father's death. The photos inspire reflective narrative, with each piece a complete vignette within a subset and a larger whole. Together, they are means through which I make sense of my family before, during, and after the 20. Ultimately, this work is a vehicle to move beyond my parents' story. In many ways, my mother's story, given her role as teller of the tale, and reveal my perspective and my memories, finally allowing my role as storyteller to emerge. I'm going to share some of these family photos and short narratives in an abbreviated story arc. Most of the pieces are written as though I'm speaking with my mother, which is simply how the writing emerged as I reflected upon the photos. But first, here is some cartographic context, because the map of Poland kept changing, which indelibly impacted the migration of my forebears. My maternal grandparents immigrated from Polish lands that had been partitioned by Russia. So they actually were south of Vilnius, which is where we find Anya today. They met in the United States, married circa 1915, and started a family. In 1922, they sold their house in Farrell, Pennsylvania, and returned to their homeland, which had reemerged after more than a century of partitioning. They took 4 children in tow, including my mother, the 3rd oldest, and there she is sitting on her mother's lap. And the last map that's relevant is the post-World War II ceding of the eastern borderlands to the Soviet Union. So those lands in gray are where my roots, my family's roots lie, which were gone, and then lands were added on the western side. So here we go. Every story has a beginning, and yours, dear mama, is rooted in America. The 3rd of 4 children born to Polish emigres, your family returns to their native land when you were 3. Rather than grow up in a small industrial city then, you come of age in a rural village in the eastern borderlands of Poland. Tidy wooden houses with thatched roofs line its main street, and land for crops and grazing livestock stretches back behind each home. Like other village women, you help with harvest, lead cows to pasture, and look after several younger siblings as well. You pray for a return to America, and when your mother asserts that an arranged marriage is a means to that end, you dutifully agree. She knows that your citizenship by birth is a valuable dowry. 3 weeks after your wedding, you bid your best friend and family and new husband farewell. In the port city of Gdynia, you await passage on the Stefan Batory to begin your new and long-awaited life. You do not know that war and cruel regimes will keep you from reuniting with your husband for 20 years. You do not know that you will not see your mother or brothers for more than 30 years. You do not know that you will never see your best friend Broncha again. And so the 20 begins. What are you thinking, my 20-something mother, dressed to impress in your fashionable frock and your hair stylishly coiffed just so? Not of the future when your hopes are realized as your husband reappears and the child that you long for becomes real. No, that life lies years ahead and would be marked with great joys and deepest heartache. No, today and tomorrow and the next are defined by a life alone, though not lonely. For now, you're a stylish young American sporting ankle-strap shoes and an on-trend purse. With your hand on hip and wry smile, I wonder, where are you going and with whom? Somewhere in this new life as an American, you find your best friend. Though she is a dozen years your senior, you share not only heritage, language, and faith, but also a birthday, November 25th. You guide each other toward key milestones that mark family life. You introduce her to her husband-to-be and then her godmother to her only child, a son. But there is great reciprocity, for when your turn at motherhood finally comes, she stands at my baptismal font with a full heart, happy that your dream too is fulfilled. She also leads you to our homestead when she leaves city life to rekindle agrarian roots. On a visit to her farm and family of 3, you admire the home next door. When it remarkably becomes available for sale, you withdraw all the dollars you have saved to make that home your own, and before long, ours, for your family. For though you don't realize it then, I am with you, a surprise for you and your husband late in life. You will share many joys with dear Lottie and the heartache of her widowhood as well. And then she will leave all of us, but mostly her teenage son, too soon. Before any of that unfolds, you are 2 stylish young women stealing a photo on a breezy ferry ride, the sun kissing your cheeks as you smile. When your husband finally joins you in America, the days number 7,302 since you pledged your troth to each other in Poland. At most, you have spent 20 of these days together. The rest form a yawning gap in your union, an estrangement incomprehensible to most. Surely you anticipated reuniting in several months or perhaps even a year, but fate and cruel regimes interfered with your plans. For 2 decades, your life has been marked by independence. Now culture and faith require submission and obedience to your mate. You must wonder, what will this partnership be like? What demons will rise from the trauma of war? Called to serve for Poland, he has suffered at the hands of the Soviets, their invasion from the east, seizing Polish lands for their own. He has found the Red Army cruel and unforgiving, escaping from their captivity a choice both wise and brave. Wounded later by Nazi shrapnel, he has nonetheless survived, yielding a chance for this long postponed future to unfold. It has taken 20 years, but at last you have celebrated your first Christmas together, sharing oplatek, the Polish Christmas wafer, during your vigil meal. Great changes are ahead and new beginnings as the counter of your days resets to 1. For 41 years, the photograph clung to its page in an album, distanced by an ocean, continent, and political regime from where it and its subject were birthed. Released from its confinement, I now hold it in my hand and notice how the scalloped edge delicately embraces the image of a new mother smiling at her babe on a summer's day. The first time I see the photo, I'm in Belarus and browsing through the album with my 92-year-old Uncle Stash. As we skim through the images of generations that I will never know, my eyes snap wide when they land upon this photo, for I realize that the infant is me. Though the brightness of the sun obscures the detail of my swaddling, my mother's smile conveys that this is her child, her firstborn, her daughter. She is serene and beautiful and content. Her eyes are downcast, focused upon my tiny being as I lie on a small table, clearly a prop that allows the photo to be taken. In this moment, memorialized by the image, my mother has realized her goals. Following 2 decades of waiting, and at age 41, she has given birth to her only child, a daughter. Through the hard work and frugality of immigrant life in America, she has purchased a home in the country for her family. The twists of fate that delayed her these joys, of war and oppressive regimes that separated her from her husband in Poland, have untangled. At 41, I find the image and know the heartache that is to follow. But for her at 41, at least for a time, she is happy. Company has come. Our guests have traveled from westernmost Pennsylvania to visit us. Rather than blood kin, you are connected through baptism, that thread that wove friends into family as members of the diaspora shared faith rituals, reimagining relatives still rooted in the motherland. You share a connection to Farrell, where your immigrant parents bought a home and welcomed a daughter, followed by a son, and then you, the third of 4 children. The parents of these guests then stood with John and Amelia as a tiny you were christened Katarzyna. Though you have little time to know your godparents, for your family returns to Poland when you are 3, the connection has been forged. In America, you now strive to maintain it with this next generation. As your peers join us, it is a chance to extend your generous hospitality. For Tata, it is an opportunity to generously pour libations as host. The ruddiness of his complexion reveals that he has entertained well. Is that why you do not smile and hold me close? Already I echo your expression and sit with hands clasped, revealing only a wisp of a smile. I don't understand this reserve, but I'm learning. I don't remember your holding me like this, but I'm glad that you did. My heart belongs to Daddy, it read, stitched in crimson thread along the hem of my favorite dress. The letters curve like my faux curls, the product of a fitful night's sleep on stiff rubber rollers that poke into my scalp. My mother has insisted upon styling my stick straight hair. Despite this irritation, I'm happy to sit with my father, my Tata, for this photo as we commemorate the Christmas holiday. My heart is indeed his, for he is always my willing student when I ask that he join me to play school. Though weary from a workday's toil, he sits patiently at table, copying English words and phrases for me in his neatest hand. Together, we watch figure skaters glide and twirl and leap into the air on Saturday afternoon's wide world of sports. We root for our heroes on Gunsmoke and Bonanza, and of course, the Wild Wild West. We imagine safaris with Marlon Perkins on Wild Kingdom and marvel at Lassie's skill and canine prowess. If not outdoors building, fixing, planting, or harvesting, he is inside, glasses perched on his nose, reading favorite publications in Polish. But when he is outdoors, I am helping, holding wood as he saws, picking up sticks before he mows, and pointing out potato beetles that he plucks off shiny leaves, then drops into a tin of gasoline. I smile when he warms milk on the stove for our barn cats, gently breaking up slices of bread that he adds to his brew. A lover of cats, I have inherited his feline affinity. He is a generous host, though he often boasts. And when he sings, his voice is strong and clear and pitch perfect. At these home events, he is also imbibing, and after guests leave, often argues at my mother. She doesn't engage, but quietly recedes, waiting for time to heal the wounds of spirit. The 20 is a thief, stealing a generation from your union as I join you late in life. With youthful parents the norm, our family is an anomaly, and you are often mistaken for my grandparents when we are at the market. It feels odd then to enter my teen years with both parents no longer in the workforce. At age 63, Tata retires from the New York State Thruway. You have already exited the mill, an application for disability benefits, thankfully approved. He is 9 years your senior, and you have asked him, begged him, to choose a pension option that provides for you after his death, but he has refused. You'd have a daughter to raise, to educate, you explain, but he stands firm. He has not shied away from hard work as a laborer, and so seeks the highest benefit to which he is due. His adjustment to pensioner is a difficult one, often yielding bitter words while you shed many tears. Through all of this, you persevere, for he is a good man with wounds that are unseen. As always, you do not engage but evade, using your faith tools of prayer and the beads of the rosary to mark your path to equanimity. And then he was gone. 4 months shy of your 50th anniversary by document, 30th by presence, you are once again to live your life alone. A confluence of health issues have proven insurmountable. A DNR permits unencumbered passage. The loss is profound, yet I'm grateful that fate has granted me the gift of witness so I might talk him toward a realm unknown. Before he leaves us, he embraces a long-awaited peace. I have traveled to Poland exploring secrets, and the tools with which I return release shame and allow for healing of heart. You have wisely instructed me to this task, and it has yielded a great mercy. As we commit him to earth, you do not wail with grief, but warmly welcome all to celebrate his memory. Your faith concedes that he has found eternal rest, and that endings are also new beginnings. When you board the Emma Spatori as a youthful bride of 19, you have no way of knowing that grave horrors will soon befall your people. Your birth in America provides a valuable advantage, for a US passport eases your return to this land of opportunity. While the timing of your emigration bears a great cost, for you will lose 2 decades of your union, It also spares you from firsthand traumas of war. 6 months after you depart, Nazi and Stalinist regimes divide the motherland. Poles, including Vladek, go to battle, and families endure terror, separation, deportation, conscription, and countless horrors of which many are unable to speak. At war's end, Poland's eastern borderlands, your home, are ceded to the Soviet Union. And while your brother Edward chooses to remain, the rest of your family repatriates to their reconfigured country. 33 years will pass until you see your mother and 3 of your brothers again. During the 1970s, you take me on 3 trips to Poland that yield happy reunions with your loved ones while introducing me to my babcia and extended family. Your heart is full, but the longing to see Edward, the last of Amelia's American-born 4, who fate has kept deep behind the Iron Curtain, persists. When Tata's passing frees you to travel, you seize the opportunity to see your mother, now a nonagenarian, one more time, and ask Brother Józef to bring Edward to Poland. He complies. Edward arrives, and another chapter of loss and longing is closed. What are you thinking, my 80-something mother, as you stand proudly in front of our home, not of the past with struggles survived and great heartaches eased with prayer and close friendships, not of the present as we share our homestead in the midst of an arc that is 20+1. It will lead the 2 of us through 3 phases, from mother and daughter, to partners and domesticity, to an end where I give you heartfelt care. Too soon we will live in each moment as your memory dims, but love never fades. For this, for you, I am forever grateful. Cultural theorist Annette Kuhn writes, telling stories about the past, our past, is a key moment in the making of ourselves. Though experienced and shared by my mother, I further her legacy as I present my memories, my truth, and therein myself. In images and documents, I find traces of my parents' existence. Through research and reflection, I meet them in the common ground of empathy and understanding. So, I'm Kristina Kwacz, the only child of Walter and Catherine. I'm Krisha, the daughter that Kasia longed for and who Vladek cherished. With Kasia's death, the 20 is now my tale. I was born because a world war and totalitarian regimes kept my parents apart for 20 years. While their reunion created our family, the demons of war and cultural conventions cultivated 20 years of heartache that I witnessed and absorbed. There is much more to be told, and I was born to tell it. I have found my voice. I step out from the shadow into the light. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Krisha. It was absolutely charming. Okay, next we will hear from Leslie.
Hi everyone. And yes, I'll echo everybody's thank you to everybody, all of you for coming, and the organizers and PAHA. It's always a treat to talk about Pears on a Willow Tree, my first published novel that came out 25 years ago. Wow. And I also will apologize for my lack of knowledge of how to say many Polish words. While my father's family is the Polish side, they were based in the Detroit area in Dearborn. In fact, I actually grew up in Iowa where there were very few Polish people. And so the story, my story, kind of is a great I don't know, bridge or culmination of what we've heard with Mary and life story interviewing, and then Kristina looking at her family and asking questions and figuring out who she is, and creating a legacy of her parents. So I'm very excited to talk. So my book, Pears on a Willow Tree, which again is about 4 generations of Polish American women, sort of started with a story, and that is that I grew up in Iowa, and every summer we would go visit my grandparents who lived in Dearborn. And it was my great-grandmother who had come to Poland. So my grandparents were first generation American. And as a kid, you go visit your grandparents and you get candy, you go to the zoo, you know, all kinds of fun things. As an adult, at least for me, as an adult, I was feeling sort of distant from my grandparents, but still, you know, I need to go see them, so on. So I remember distinctly an afternoon where I was spending time on my grandmother's couch. She was staring at me, I was staring at her. We were trying to talk about something, find something to talk about. And then honestly, out of the blue, I just said to her, "Oh, I tried making pierogi a couple of weeks ago. I enjoy cooking, and I thought that would be something fun to try." I'd never really, my grandmother had never made them for us. I'd had them only in restaurants and frozen Mrs. T's pierogies. And so I said, "I tried making pierogi." And she like snapped to attention. It was like, pierogi. I make the best pierogi in our family. And I was like, what? I didn't know anything about that. And so we had a whole amazing conversation about pierogi, about her secrets, about all sorts of things. It just opened my eyes. I felt very close to her in that time. And so then I went home and wrote a short story about 4 generations of Polish American women making pierogi in the kitchen. Ultimately, I thought of that as a short story. Ultimately, that turned into the first chapter of Pears on a Willow Tree. And I decided to keep writing about these women and think about this Polish background that I didn't know about. So my I guess my life story interviewing was with my grandmother, 2 of her sisters, so that's 2 great aunts, and then one of the great aunt's daughters, if you can keep track of that. So 4 Polish ladies, as I called them. And they are all gone now, but one of the great aunts lived to be 106, and she actually died last year. And my great grandmother was never part of these conversations, but I was fortunate enough to have known her as a child. She's the one who came from Poland, and she lived to be 103. So I think I have a lot of time to hope to write some more books. I knew her as a child, and she was a very fascinating person to me. She had very vibrant blue eyes, and even though she was very tiny, she felt very powerful. But she spoke Polish and didn't know very much English, so she was kind of closed off to me as a source. So I was more of an observer of her. And as I was working on the book, thinking about these stories, thinking about these women, thinking about the past, I actually became a little angry and bitter that I did not know family stories, that nobody ever talked about anything. The only thing I knew about my great grandmother is that when she arrived in Ellis Island, she had a banana. And that was the only story I had gotten out of her as a child. It was the main thing even her daughters talked about. I was really aggravated when I learned about the Gilia, the Christmas Eve celebration of Polish people, which is sounds like an amazing holiday that I never had in Iowa, or that I didn't even really think that my Polish relatives did anymore there in Michigan. So it was like all this amazing stuff could have been mine and somehow wasn't. So, and surely, as we all know, everybody has a story. There is something that those women had been through and experienced and felt and thought about. So why didn't I get any of those stories? And I think in thinking about it, there's sort of a few theories I have. And one would be that my father was the first in his family to go to college, and then he ended up getting a PhD in chemistry, and then he ended up getting a teaching job at the University of Iowa. So he really made such a break from this family. And again, speaking of someone who doesn't tell many stories, he doesn't really talk about how or why, but I have to imagine that that was purposeful. Everybody else stayed in Detroit. He did not. And I think because of who he was, he had that connection, like, we have to go visit. This is my obligation as a son. But he was always kind of the outsider, the different one. And my sister and I, as my grandmother's only grandchildren, were utterly beloved. But I feel like we were sort of, I don't know, treated with kid gloves. We were special. We also were outsiders. We were the celebrities who came to visit everybody back in Michigan. There was also the language barrier, which I know Mary said was an issue. So I couldn't ever really get to know my great-grandmother. And then even beyond sort of those things, I think there's this sense of pervasive sense of propriety, that's the word, of my relatives kind of not wanting to share dirty laundry. I don't know if they were being protective, if they were embarrassed, they wanted to put on a good front, if they wanted to say, see, we're as good as you fancy people who live in Iowa. So I think that they were definitely, as Mary said, they were definitely shaping stories or shaping their lives by omitting the stories. And definitely, this was a family who was very accustomed to tamping things down, keeping quiet about the hard stuff, not complaining. They're very stoic. They just didn't want to focus on bad things. It didn't mean they were all optimistic and cheery, but they just didn't really want to talk about bad things. And another factor, of course, had to be that everyone in the family worked in sort of blue collar service jobs. It was a hard life. It was hard work, and they focused on getting money. They wanted money. They wanted everybody to have a job. They wanted everyone to seem secure. So I certainly can see if that is your focus, you're not going to be sitting around talking about the good old days. Maybe the good old days that weren't really all that good. Let's just go keep our heads down, get our job, and hang out. So ultimately, in the end, I really had to face the fact that absolutely nothing, not even Mary with all her charm, was going to pry any deep secrets out of these women that I was talking to. Nothing. I was not going to get ready-made family stories that I could plunk into my book. Like hearing Kristina's story, it's just so clear how that would make a really amazing novel, that family story. My family did not present me with that kind of material, but I knew I had to continue talking to these Polish ladies. I knew I had to sort of figure out what was going on and what I could do as a fiction writer. So what did I talk about in these conversations, and how did I let my family inform my book and enhance my skills as a fiction writer? And then how did I learn to embrace that freedom of just jumping more fully into making things up? Because that's what I get to do. Kristina and Mary don't get to do that, but I can do whatever I want. And that is some power. So I knew that in a novel, a fictional book, something I'm making up, I had to have conflict. So I had to make up relationships. Instead of having my father as the sort of generational character, I created a woman, a female. So it truly is, in my novel, 4 generations of Polish American women. In my real life, my mother is not Polish. So when I got to make up a character out of nothing, well, I could do whatever I wanted with her. And so she's an alcoholic. And I know that my relatives are always very pleased from the grave to hear me say that nobody in my family that I knew of, so I have some suspicions, was an alcoholic. So Ginger in my book is very much made up, and her conflict, which is very central to the book, is also made up. So that's sort of a plot, making up a plot. And I knew that because I was going to be making things up and suddenly someone's an alcoholic, characters that I did work with, even if they seemed like they might be my grandmother or seemed like they might be one of my great aunts, I needed to give them very different names and very different personalities than my relatives. So I sort of created composite characters, thinking of what I knew about these women and then putting various qualities, sprinkling various qualities differently so that they wouldn't necessarily think I was writing about them exactly. I used my grandmother's house as a setting because I remember that very vividly, but I also used some of my other aunts' houses, and then I also made things up. So I purposely took steps backwards so that I wouldn't get locked into the sort of a bad point when you're writing about something that seems autobiographical, but maybe isn't, like, oh, my grandmother would never do XYZ. It's like, my grandmother might not, but this character is going to have to do that. So she's not my grandmother. She's this character and she will do this. And because I knew that I would never get, or they didn't have, or they didn't want to talk about secrets and dark conflicts, I had to focus elsewhere in our conversations because I knew I still wanted to talk to them and see what was what. So I loved talking to them about food and houses. And because it was Detroit, cars, we had many arguments about cars and their jobs. I actually ended up listening to what they wanted to share, not what I wanted them to share. I listened to what they wanted me to know about them. And I think that the book and my relationship with them became stronger for that. And our talks were a joy, not a chore, not me being frustrated trying to find out some big story. It was just me listening to, what happened that time they took the baby buggy down to the river, little simple things. And they saw me as a willing ally, a listener, and they trusted me. I mean, they weren't going to tell me their secrets. They still trusted me. And I think most importantly, because I happily accepted what they were willing to offer me, they saw their own lived lives as valued. And that is very different than, a reporter trying to ferret out information or secrets. And if they want to keep their secrets, if anyone wants to keep their secrets, who am I to say you're wrong for doing so? That's a person's right, absolutely, to take things to the grave for whatever reason they determine. And I had to learn to accept that. So for the book, I wove in lots of small details that they shared, but mostly I carefully watched their interactions with each other as they spoke and the way their words tumbled around, how they finished sentences, special little phrases that they used, and their intonations. I thought about the silences of the things they weren't sharing. I listened to every squabble about how every car, no, that was the car we had in 1944. No, it was 1945. I remember because we lived on Polk Street. Like really, really big fights about tiny details. And even though the tiny details didn't matter, seeing the interaction between them is what spoke to me. I soaked up their flavor, and then I was able to use that to deepen the plot lines that I was developing and inventing. And I also, as I said, I thought about things that I remembered from visiting growing up. I thought about my grandmother's house. And instead of trying to think and remember every single thing about my grandmother's house or studying old pictures, as a fiction writer, what I did was sort of think, what is something that rises to the top? And I didn't even have to think what rises to the top. I remembered very clearly a clock that my grandmother had that chimed every quarter hour. And that clock, I threw it in as a description in the house, but it actually becomes a very symbolic clock in the book. So it was a real clock first. It was my grandmother's clock. It was one of the things I most remembered from her house. And then it became sort of a symbol in the book. So what I would say is you don't need to know every detail. You just need to know the right detail. And then another thing that I did, which sounds kind of strange in a talk about making things up and using family stories as writing material, is that I did do a lot of research. This was in the pre-Google area, so I read a ton of books about people's lives in the 1900s, the 1920s, Detroit history, cookbooks, Polish immigration, all kinds of things. Because what you have to realize as a writer, as a fiction writer, and in many ways, most people are not as unique as they like to think, as we like to think. So the lives of my immigrant relatives and first generation relatives were probably pretty similar to many other immigrants that came to the United States during that same period. So that I was able to use that research and use the Polish details and then plunk in some of the feelings, emotions, things like that into my book. I mean, obviously, we don't want to stereotype people, but reading about groups of people who arrived in the United States at the same time as my relatives did offered me a glimpse of the challenges and joys that it was likely that my relatives faced. And my speculation and assumptions in this way fed my imagination, and I would say gave me insight into my own identity. So we're in this situation. I imagine this is how I would react, and I could put that into the book. And I think, honestly, that's the most important part, is capturing the humanity of people, remembering that across time and geography, humans have been laughing and loving and crying and squabbling since caveman days. It's really easy to look up what kind of car was popular during the year of your book, what a kid might eat for lunch. It's also easy to make those things up if you have a basis of knowledge from your research. So what you want to do is get the people right. And so in the end, I melded what I knew about my family into the invented characters I knew my book needed to be a successful story with a beginning, middle, arc. In doing so, I was able to take their personal stories and lives and use my research and my own imagination to kind of see into my family members and create fictional lives that simultaneously weren't theirs on a literal sense, but that metaphorically, maybe they were the lives that they thought no one else knew or no one else bothered to see. I was able to go beyond the language barrier between me and my great-grandmother. And by inventing my family stories, I feel I reached a deeper truth of who these women are, of who my family is. I could see past the things they were not telling me into who they are as people. I could show value to them, to people who probably didn't consider their lives as especially valuable or important, people who the broader culture pretty much dismisses, all the while letting them maintain their facade of secrecy and dignity. In the end, as writer Tim O'Brien either said or is said to have said, just because something never happened doesn't mean it's not true. Thank you.
Wow, thank you. Thank you very much. Leslie, okay, I have like tons of questions, and I don't want to dominate it. So I'm going to start with one to each person and then let the audience ask questions. And if you don't, I will come in after this, after yours. I do want to just give a shout out to Barbara Wilke-Bauer, given that what she's just joined, I saw, and she has written one of the best books, a Polish doctor in a Nazi concentration camp, based on interviews with her own mother as well. And she's an anthropologist at the University of Michigan. And it's just is absolutely one of my favorite books, and Leslie's. And Leslie, I have just a very small question. I have a larger one, but I wanted to know why you put that fourth generation daughter, why you made her why she went to Thailand. But that's the small one. So the bigger question. So with Kristina, why did you choose to write this as a dialogue with your mother? And did you choose other formats? And how did that particular format, what did that writing it in that way as a dialogue with her, how did that shape you or constrain you? And then sort of a follow-up question, this gets to what Leslie was talking about, but there's all of this, these life stories, these storytelling, especially when it has to do with family members. There's always this issue of tensions and secrets and conflicts, right? And I know, like with the Grzinski girls, one of the ways it happened is when I finished the first draft, I gave it to the 5 aunts, my mom and the 4 aunts. And at that point, the project almost didn't go forward, right? I mean, at one point, one of my aunts was sitting there and she pulled out a picture of her father and put it on the table. She said, "This is my father." And then she took my manuscript, threw it down and said, "This is not my father. And if you're going to continue doing this, we're going to pull out of this," right? So it was, but in case your mother and father were no longer alive, so you had some sort of freedom to write. And I just sort of wonder how that shaped you, given that they couldn't read what you were writing. And then similarly to Leslie, the sort of larger question I have is, so impressed with your research about this and the interviewing of people. And then, you can only take parts of it and writing a different story. And did you use that in all of your other books? I know that I think your second novel was in Iowa and it had to do with a suicide and a train track, I remember. And I'm wondering if you in your other books, you use sort of this sort of a life story interviewing as well, or did you use other methods? And then the question then to you is that, since your, I guess, great aunts, and I think it would be a second cousin, were still alive, after they read the book, no alcoholics in our family, there is in the book, but were there other things? Did they debate? How did they respond to this book when it came out?
Kristina.
Okay, so I'll dive in. Why did I write most of these pieces as if I were speaking with my mother? It just happened. It was not a conscious choice. I would reflect on the images. And if I do a little self-analysis here, it's perhaps acknowledging things that she told me, my way of coming to a deeper understanding of her and her experiences. For many, many years in my youth, I thought she was weak because she would not stand up for herself during those times when my dad had been drinking and became angry. And there were outbursts and she would just evade. As an adult, I came to realize how much strength that took. And doing the research that I did in terms of her faith in particular, and especially women in Polish Catholicism, and your reward is going to be in the afterlife. So your strength is to endure, and it's really me acknowledging her. And I think at some level, it's my way of communicating with her. It was not a conscious choice. It just happened. And the beginning, most of these works that it started were about my mom because she was the teller of the tale. But there is also my dad's story, which is where there are deep secrets. And at the PAHA conference, I touched upon that a little bit. So there's a lot of research that needs to happen there. And I think that there will be more reflection and more writing to my father, because I have been without him much, much longer than my mom, over 30 years, whereas my mom only about 12 years or so, 13 years. So there is a difference. And I also spent the last 21 years of my life, of my mother's life, in our home, which is where I'm at now. And so we were right there. And we came to a different level of relationship. And I think that time and the ultimate caring for her in a health sense, in a physical sense, in an economic sense, really brought me to a different place. So I hope that makes sense.
Thank you. Leslie?
Yeah, those are good questions, Mary. Thank you. The tiny question, just to speak to why does Amy go to Thailand? Again, it's one of those plot and circumstance, art and life, that part of the tension in the book is people as women wanting to leave or not sure if they should stay, trying to find a place. And so I knew that it made logical sense for Amy, the youngest generation, to flee and to flee her alcoholic mother. So I knew that she was going to have to go somewhere. And just by coincidence, I was working on this book during a time when my sister, not fleeing anybody, but wanting to travel and see the world, was living in Thailand. And so I thought, let's see, where should Amy go? Well, Thailand. There you go. So it's kind of funny how things can just be coincidence and then yet seem absolutely perfect, at least in my opinion, for the book. That's like halfway around the world, such a different culture. So it really worked for me. And how did my relatives feel after they read the book? Well, I am pretty sure that many of them never even read it. And that was kind of a gift to me. Like, I didn't have to worry about that. That said, did they come to every single reading I did in Michigan and sit in the front row and smile proudly and wave when I pointed them out? Absolutely, absolutely. So they were very proud of me, very proud of the book. And I do know that two of them did read it. One is a reader who I think she had a complicated, this was the second cousin. I think she had a complicated relationship with her mother, and she's definitely someone who had some deep secrets that she did not share. But she could read it as a book because she read a lot, and she could see it as a reflection on the family without being a mirror on the family. So she was fine. And then what surprised me is one of the great aunts, who I wouldn't have thought would actually read the book, read it, and she's not somebody who, reads a lot at all, but she came up to me at some book party and quoted a line to me about ginger and drinking and sort of the way gin tastes, like this really tiny, very specific line. She quoted that to me and looked me in the eye and said, that's a really good line. That's a really good line. You know what you're doing. So I guess that was kind of a stamp of approval, and also made me feel like, well, there's somebody who probably has more to say also. So, and then as for using research in other books, well, now it's so much easier with the internet, and I'm afraid I really do like to write a very immersive kind of book where all the details flow and the plot line arises from a very specific setting or time. Like the second novel that Mary alluded to is set in 1975 in small town Iowa. And I did so much research on specific details, as I do for all the books. Like if there is a song mentioned in something I've written, it is a song that was popular at exactly that time, So I do a lot of research, but I think what's a little bit different now, instead of life stories, maybe I'm doing the autoethnology with myself, so that my books, even though they seem to be about very different people, the last book was set in Washington, D.C. One of the recurring characters was an imagined Speaker of the House, a politician. So he's not anything like me, but a lot of the details of Washington, D.C. life are very specific to me. The other characters aren't like me at all, except they are me. So I think that I'm using myself more and more as the topic, even though I try to disguise it, and I probably don't disguise it as much as I like to think. But, you know, I'm kind of like my Polish relatives. I'm not about to dump my deep secrets out for everybody to know. I will just tuck them away and hide them a little bit in fiction.
Thank you. I'll just say I'm a 5th generation Polish American from Michigan, and I was living in Thailand. So when I read your book, I was like, oh my gosh. Like, okay, other questions? I think you can either raise your hand like that if I see you, or you can raise your hand in chat, or you could maybe even just unmute if we've got 2 screens now, or you could put it in chat.
Jerry has a question I can see.
Great. Jerry?
Hi, the presentation overall is wonderful. Thank you. And I have a question for you, Leslie. As you know, Pears is one of my favorite books of all time. And I loved hearing the backstory about it and how you tell stories by mixing your memories with your imagination. I have to piggyback on the question about how your family reacted to your book by asking if you, in the future, wrote another book that involved family or close friends as the basis of some of your content, how would you balance your integrity as a professional writer and also a professor of writing with any desire for family harmony? Would you, let's say, if you were deciding this time to include a really delicate family situation, and would you show that piece of your manuscript in advance to the family? And if they had comments, would you take it out or revise it? Just in general, how do you balance that with your integrity as a writer?
Those are great questions. And I think every writer I know wrestles with that question. And I feel like it gets maybe more complicated as we get older. Also, sometimes maybe it gets easier because people will die, and then you know, you can do what you want, I guess. But I think that what I have done lately is try to live by the principle of being hardest on myself, so that if there is a character who might be sort of a point of view or point of reference character that seems like me, that is the person who kind of does the worst things or has the bad secrets, even if they're made up, because I am willing to take the flack for whatever. And also I'm in charge of the story, so I don't have to say anything I don't want to. So I think and even if I were writing about a family member, I would probably be the hardest on myself if I were exploring that relationship in a novel. And would I show a book to somebody or a story before it was published? I would have to hope I would be brave enough not to write the story, to see what happens with it. So it's going to get published, and then give the person a heads up before it gets published, but not necessarily correct anything. Like Mary's story about her, I think it was aunt, that was very dramatic. You know, that would be a really hard thing to see. And I'm eager to hear the outcome of that. But yeah, you as a writer, you know, you're going to hurt somebody, but also, you know, that there are lots of stories that you can tell where you don't have to hurt anybody. So you just have to think, what is the story you need to tell? What are the ramifications? How might it change the relationship? And how might you mitigate it by, as I do, being hardest on myself?
Thank you.
Thanks, Leslie. Yeah, in my case, if I could take, as one of your lines described, I'm not a journalist either. I don't go for the jugular, and I was using people's real names. They weren't even fictional. They weren't even pseudonyms or anonymous. So as I said, I wanted to go home for Christmas every year. I wanted that Vigilia. And so if there were small things I could take out, I would take them out, right? But finally, the press said like they couldn't keep changing it. And I remember the last line of one of the women, my aunt called me up and she said, you know, went on and on and on about some line I had about Marx and religion is the opiate of the people. And I said, you know, look at, you know, Aunt Fran, I'm actually talking about the fact that I think religion is positive in your life. And I'm talking against Marx and blah, blah, blah. And she said, I don't care what all that's about. All I'm saying is a book about me should not have any mention of drugs. It's like, okay, that's staying in. Anyways, Pavel, you have a question?
Yes, yes, I have a question to the presenters. Do you know any family members in Poland? If so, how strong are your ties with those members? With the members?
Oh, I can hit that. I have just celebrated in 2021. It was the 50th anniversary of my first trip. I've now lost track. I think it's been 15 times. I go to see family as often as I can. Thanks to Mom, I have my first cousins who were my peers in terms of age are all there. I get invited to weddings. I see them. We have a rich and very strong connection. And that's really all because of my mom. And I have traveled to Belarus because that's where my father's brother resided. I am in touch with the family, but now politically, that open door situation has changed, which breaks my heart. But you know, maybe sometime in the future that will change and I can see them again, but we do keep in touch. So yeah, I have very strong connections because of both of them.
You're very lucky. I do not have any, I mean, I'm sure I have relatives in Poland, but I do not have any connection to them, sadly.
There's a question on the chat that Anya Kirschman asked before, so maybe we can go to that and then to Erica. So the question in the chat is from Anya Kirschman. The power of food in memory and in family relations, especially among women, is featured prominently both in Leslie's and Mary's writing. A question to Kristina: how important was food in your family?
I would say very important. Also, there are photographs that come to mind that will be that I'll be using as prompts about dinner parties that were held here at our home or with extended family, and also Mama and her golumpki. Mama didn't do pierogi, but her golumpki were renowned. And there is a photo that I have of her as a senior in her sweatsuit, her kind of peachy pink sweatsuit by the stove with the dim, with the little, you know, smoke coming up, the condensation. And I know that will spark something. So yes, there's some fodder there for writing and quite important stuff. Thank you for asking.
Erica?
Hi, Kristina. I hadn't quite put this together before, but I had a thought listening to you today. I know a lot of your focus has been on your family relation and the dynamics, but if your mother was living independently basically through her 20s and 30s, but was a married woman, she would have had a lot fewer social restrictions than a single woman trying to live independently at the time. And then to have her husband arrive at her late 30s and have to go into a much more kind of traditional wife lifestyle, I imagine would have been quite a rough transition. But I wonder if you've looked into like what her personality or lifestyle changes were from this sort of, in a way, like empowered independent woman to a more traditional setting.
There's a lot of photographs that I will be working with about that are a deeper dive into the 20. There is a difference that I see in her during the 20. She is living in Brooklyn or in that metropolitan New York area. She is with other Poles who have migrated to the U.S. They are meeting in each other's apartments. They're going to dances. It's festive. She is happy. She's living she's living a good life, and she's smiling. When I look at the photos of my childhood, they're different, and it's not the same smile. So I think that is really a testament to that dramatic change of, yes, she got what she wanted in terms of a family, but there were costs. And those are things that I'm going to be exploring. And for me, the images they're a research tool. And yes, I'm making my assumptions, but I'm also looking at the social aspects also.
Do we have any more questions from the audience?
Oh, here's another on chat.
Mm-hmm.
From Xenia. Do you have any tips, advice for fiction writers writing about the Polish American experience and navigating the publishing scene? Great question.
That is a good question. What I would say is that this is probably a very good time to be writing about the Polish American scene, Polish scene, because this is a time where publishers, at least, give lip service to wanting to hear different stories and different points of view and voices that have been sort of shoved aside and silenced for many, many, many years. So I think that is in your favor for sure. When I published or was trying to sell Pears on a Willow Tree 25 years ago, I mean, I was very lucky that I guess I found an agent fairly quickly, and then they sold it fairly quickly compared to things now. But the editors were sort of more responsive to the 4 women trope rather than, and it was like, oh yes, this Polish thing, whatever, there's no Polish people here, who cares about that? And it was shocking to me and shocking to them when I reported, how many Polish American people are in the country, how maybe there aren't that time many in New York, but look at Chicago, look at Buffalo, look at Pennsylvania, look at Ohio, like they're everywhere. And because those Polish people that I said existed did not have very many stories, I was really embraced by the Polish American community, by PAHA, by community groups. It was like just a big warm hug. It was really amazing. So what I would suggest is write your story that you need to tell, and then do a little bit of research before you start querying, and note, here's where pockets of Polish population are. Here's how many readers there are. Here's books that have done well. Like 25 years later, my book is still in print, which is kind of an amazing thing these days. So do a little bit of research, show why your story is important, and how many people will be eager to hear this. But I would also hate for someone to think, oh, I shouldn't write my story because no one will publish it. Write your story, write it really well, do the research, have some persistence, and if I can do it, I know that you can too.
Right. So Magda's next, but I just want to follow up on that. So Leslie, do you have any understanding of how many of your readers are Polish Americans and how many are not? And, I mean, I think the idea that, like, for example, if I was any other ethnic or racial group, when I would write a book, I would hope that it would go to a wider audience. And it's good to, you know, be able to tell them, yes, there's this large Polish American community, but it seems to me, as you said, the experiences of Polish Americans are similar to other experiences of immigrants and the generations that, and I think your book, it's just such a wonderful story that people who are not Polish would read it.
Totally. I'd say like it half and half. You know, definitely I went to so many book clubs where we would talk about my book and I would hear, oh, this was just like my German grandmother. This reminds me of my Irish grandmother. Like it's a very classic tale. It's a very classic tale. A lot of people could relate to it. I do think in publishing, they just are really looking for an immediate audience that they may not have thought of. So I guess that's why I kind of advise the little extra attention to how many Polish writers there are. But yes, a good story can be very universal.
Magda?
I think we also had Pavel, and I think Pavel was potentially, so we should maybe take both questions because, and then, sorry, Mary, for interrupting.
Okay, so it's my turn, or is it?
Yes, Pavel.
Okay, it's my turn. To Mrs. Pietrzyk, why are you in Iowa? Did your family emigrate to Iowa? How did it happen?
Yeah, no, people did not come from Poland to Iowa. That would be quite an interesting journey.
Yeah, exactly.
So my great grandmother went to Schenectady first and met my great grandfather. They got married and then they ended up in the Detroit area and had their children, my grandmother, and then my grandmother, everybody kind of stayed in Detroit. And my father is the one who left, who went to college in Michigan at Wayne State, and then went to graduate school at Iowa State University in chemistry, met my mother. They got married. She was from Northern Iowa. And then he went on the job market, the academic job market, and had two choices. One was University of Iowa in Iowa City, and the other was, I think, University of Tennessee in Knoxville. And he chose Iowa, I think, because it was sort of closer to Michigan and his family, and definitely closer to my mother's family. So there we were, my last name in Iowa City, Iowa. Nobody could ever spell it or say it.
Thank you.
Okay, sorry. And again, Magda, we really will get to you, but I just deleted someone's message in the meeting chat because of my incompetence. I was trying to give a like and I ended up deleting it. And I don't know if I deleted it for everyone, but and I don't even know who it was, but it was talking about a new book coming out, Polish American Voices. I hope others can still see it. And if not, could the person please put it back in the chat? Okay, Magda.
This wonderful presentation. Leslie, I probably already said this to you before, but just piggybacking on what you've said about, you know, your book.
I'm sorry, could you talk a little louder? I'm sorry.
Oh, yes. Just piggybacking on what you said before. I moved here when I was 7 from Poland, and I didn't find your book until I was in my 30s, but growing up in the United States, there never was anything written about the Polish American experience. So that was really important for me. And I have a question for you, just if you have any advice about creating composite characters. I feel like every time I try to fictionalize any kind of family story, it always just, I don't know, it just doesn't feel authentic to me, or I don't know, it feels like I'm not quite getting the character right because like I know who it is, and so just any advice about creating an authentic composite character.
Well, first of all, I've read your writing, so I think you're probably being a little too hard on yourself, but I will trust that you're not happy. And I think one thing that I think is helpful, this is sort of a trick I do with any character, but I will come up with a list of, usually it's sort of physical things, but it could also be qualities. And I tell myself I have to write like 35 things, because the first 10 are going to be very basic and simple, and like brown hair, blue eyes, 5'10", like really not very interesting things. But if you have numbered out, 35, and you have to fill up that list with something, eventually your mind will start finding way more interesting things to include. And then what I think is really fun to do, whether it's 35 or just you're thinking about your character in general, is to give them something that is really unexpected, or to give them a secret or a lie that they are going to tell. But something, if you have your list of 35 things and you've created this person who seems perfect, and then what is the exact opposite of that? And the person is also that. I think that's what really helps create lively human characters, because we are all filled with contradictions. And as for composite characters, it is really hard when you're seeing, or like I'm seeing my grandmother in my head, and she's doing something she would never do. I just think it has to be that meanness of the fiction writer that just forces our loved characters to do something terrible. They just have to, or there's no plot.
Great, thank you. That's really helpful.
Misha, is that a hand raised? Yeah. You have to unmute.
Good morning. First, I'd like to thank you all for a lovely way to start a Saturday morning. And there are many familiar names and folks here. I actually just heard from Bożena Buda, who is on this morning. There are a number of things here I just wanted to present. I founded a Polish school in Mahwah, New Jersey, 28 years ago. So in answer to that international, beyond Polish communication, we've found throughout these years that many of our parents now are mixed parents. We have Polish Americans who can read, who speak Polish but don't read Polish language. We have numerous parents who are Mexican, who are Italian, who have no connection to Polishness at all, except to deliver their children on a Saturday morning to school. I, as an American, have over the years had every one of your situations. My babcia came to America, to Ellis Island, in 1903. My mother was born here. My father fought in Tobruk, and he was in the RAF, so I have that next generation of the Polish bohater who came into my life. And myself, as an American who understands each one of these little dots. My question to all the authors is, did your original thought of writing your books follow through to the end, or did you follow those dots as you went along, and your theme changed and you said, oh, this is more important than this beginning? And the development of your stories, was it what you really started out to present? And again, I just wanted to thank you all, and I hope everyone here becomes an author in the future.
So
I'll just go first.
Yeah, we only have a few minutes left, so I won't answer, but I'll let Leslie and Kristina.
I'll just be very quick that I didn't really know what I was doing. So I followed dots. I definitely followed dots. I just wrote the next story to answer a question I had about the previous story. And I would say that things really locked in for me, where I felt I know what I'm doing, is about halfway through my writing process, when I arrived. Actually, my husband arrived at the title for me, Pears on a Willow Tree, which means you're looking for something you can never find. And I saw how that thematically could connect the plot and the emotional core of the story. That's a great question. So follow those dots anywhere.
And I'm still working on my dots, because I'm really at the beginning of what of course I envision as a publication. And so the journey just started. And I'm excited about how it will unfold. So yeah, I'm looking forward to more dots.
Thank you.
And I will defer to Anya Muller at this point. Can we keep going, or it's time? I have time.
It's time, but if we have any more questions, or if Mary, you have a question, I guess.
Yeah, okay. I have just one question, and maybe it's more of a plea to people out there, and it has to do also with Kristina's use of photographs, which we haven't really talked with about. And it's such a, in addition to interviewing, but the photographs. So my father just had his 90th birthday, and a relative showed up with a gigantic box of photos, almost 100 years worth of photos. We have no idea who most of these people are. And I just wondered if Kristina and others, how do you label how can we over the generations in the past, sometimes people used to just write on the back, and I'm not sure. And now everyone has digital photos and they're not actually printing them out. But I think the photos are really, really important. And could you just talk a little bit about, did you know everyone on the photos, or did you have to go back to Poland and have people identify who people were? Or...
I know many of the people in the photographs, and that's really thanks to Mom, who introduced me to the extended family, in Poland so many years ago. I did sit down with her probably 25 years ago. We have like the big trunk, and in the trunk are studio shots, because that's the first thing we got, right? And we actually sat down, and it was pre-post-it note time, and we wrote down who these people are. So at least I have that. There are many others that I don't know, but they are not of the immediate family. Having been to Belarus, I'm there with my phone taking pictures of that album that I'm going through it with, at that time with Uncle Stash, and then after he had passed away, with his daughter, and I'm shooting. So I have that information. We also have albums that I put together during those years of, you got the photos from, and they did write information on the back. And we actually have I have very little of our family here, our nuclear family, because most of the pictures got sent to Poland. So, it was a shock, but a pleasant one to find that picture of me. Wow, I don't know who took it. We had the Brownie camera. I know we had the little square format. Someone clearly was visiting, gave it to Mom, and sent it away. So as I get a chance, if I get a chance to look at some of these family albums abroad, there are treasures in there. But I do have some good information and good knowledge thanks to my mom.
And then how about Ted? We'll give you the last question.
I don't have a question, just a comment. I remember in America Echo, in a book I was working on with Anna Kirschman, about how many immigrants wrote numerous letters to the newspapers, particularly America Echo, but how many of them ever wrote a book? I doubt very few. And if we look at other ethnic groups in America, in some of them, there seem to be a lot of authors, a lot of people writing stories about their own group, their families, anybody and everybody they could think of. And yet in the Polish community, somehow there wasn't that kind of impetus to write, which I think is very sad. I think a lot of wonderful stories and wonderful lives have been forgotten, never gotten written down. And I'm glad to hear these authors present who have written and done it, and have come up with something that is a model for others to follow. And I hope that we can spread that idea. If these people can do it, you can do it.
Okay, Anya, do you want to?
I think it's time to end. Thank you all for wonderful presentations, Mary. Wonderful questions. Leslie and Kristina, wonderful presentations. I think it shows the potential of the work that has to be done in the future, and also shows that PAHA should continue organizing webinars like this one. We'll be in touch. This was organized by Polish American Historical Association. please join us. We are a fun group of people that is doing a lot of good work, like the examples that you've just listened to. Thank you all, and we'll be in touch with more programming coming up soon.
Bye. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Kristina and Leslie.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you. This was really wonderful. I'm so happy to have been here.
This was great. Oh, let me stop recording. Pause. Stop.